Today is Wednesday, April 16th. It is 11:18 a.m. and this is the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee. We are continuing with our testimony on S-127. And Andrew Brewer is here to share his thoughts. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. For the record, Andrew Brewer with Downs, Rachlin, and Martin. It occurs to me, you all must wonder who all these people sitting around the room are sometimes. In large part, we're advocates. So Downs, Rachlin, and Martin is a law firm in Burlington. And then I like to say they have this office of misfit lobbyists here in Montpelier. And I'm part of that group. I'm not an attorney. In fact, you probably know Patty Comline. Some of you may know Gabrielle Molina. And Becky Lewandowski. That's our team of four. And none of us are actually attorneys working for this law firm. We have about 30 plus clients. 9 times out of 10, when I'm in this room, I'm probably representing regional development corporations, the RDCs, interested in all things economic development. So, on this issue, the CHIP issue is a form of project-based TIF. Which is always a priority to be looking at for RDCs. Has this committee, Representative Granning, has this makeup discussed veggie yet? Oh boy, well that'll be fun when we get to veggie. Okay, just a little bit, yeah. So we haven't discussed that this year because we got a 2-year sunset in the program last year, so it gives us a year of grace to not have to deal with veggie. But next year, guess what? We'll be in here a lot discussing veggie. On the agenda, it says I'm representing the Vermont Builders and Remodelers Association, aka the Home Builders. And they are also very interested in the housing bill. The Home Builders are at least VBRA, the Vermont Builders and Remodelers Association. Largely made up of single-family buildings, single-family residential buildings. They do have some developers who are members, Snyder, Custom Homes, SD Ireland, to name a few. And I think you've all kind of got this distinction between a developer and a builder. One of my developers will joke, I don't even own a hammer. They buy the land, they do all of the zoning and permitting, secure the financing, and then they call a builder to come in and actually build the homes. VBRA is largely made up of those builders. For the one-off residential builder, I'm not sure I could get them interested in TIF and try to explain TIF and CHIP if my life depended on it. That's the developer side of things. They're going to rely on the developer to handle all of that. So that's kind of the makeup of who I'm representing when I'm in the room here. I'm going to keep it high level. I promise you I'm going to give you tons of time before lunch. I'm not going to keep you long. When it comes to, I'm going to jump right in on the but for. Representative Olson's your quote yesterday is sticking in my mind is kind of summing it up perfectly, which is it's a judgment call. And I see how we get caught in this circular argument about the but for. We want to use tax increment to pay for a project. Well, but what if that project was going to get built anyways? Well, then we need to ask, was it going to be built anyways? It's an impossible answer. It's a possible question to answer. So we get in this circular argument of going around and around. What if? And it's a policy, it's a decision and a judgment call for you all, whether or not you think these projects would happen without this money. I think you can make a good case that the question when it comes to housing, the question has been asked and answered. We are not building enough housing. For builders, what we're trying to do here with CHIP is not increase demand. This isn't a demand problem, it's a supply problem. The auditor is correct when he says that the market does not all on its own, build these kind of middle income affordable homes that we're all talking about. So how do we encourage builders and developers to say, hey, you can still make your margin building here rather than up here? And money is the answer. I think the trust fund is excellent, but how much are we going to put in the Vermont Housing Conservation Trust Fund to build housing? The whole idea behind CHIP was to provide some incentive that will help a project pencil out without having to have direct incentives, without having to hit up the general fund. If you want to make this an affordability program, we can do that, but you also have to be prepared to come up with tens of millions of dollars of incentives to go along with that. That's the only way that's going to work. This is designed to not have to do that. And I think that for builders, they are doing their best. And, designers, I often quote my friend Jason Webster that owns Huntington Homes out in East Montpelier. I think he's been in committee before. Some of you heard of him. He builds those volumetric modular. He's really the only guy in the state doing the volumetric modular construction. And he talks about capacity. And there, again, the building community is at capacity. They're not driving the demand. They are trying their best to meet it. But again, what we're trying to do is show them we can build in this middle area here and help your project pencil out. The affordability criteria, as I discussed, I heard the auditors say that, there are people who say that any housing development is good housing development. And I think he disagrees with that. I do agree with that. And I think there's a pressure that's happening. Do you all want to design a program that incentivizes the building of multi-million-dollar homes? Of course not. That's not what we're after at all. But I think there's a good case to make. You can envision a doctor or somebody with an upper income who can afford a $700,000-800,000 home, and they're not being built. So what do? They pay cash for the $500,000 home that they'll live in the meantime. And this is happening. And that puts a downward pressure all the way down the line. The person who should be in the $500,000 home can't find anything. Maybe they stay as renters, maybe they buy a cheaper home, and there's a downward pressure. And then you have homelessness. And, I'm not trying to draw a direct line to homelessness, but a lot of those people used to have a place they can afford. Now they don't. And so I do think, don't be afraid if fast forwarding and there's a CHIP program in place and you have a municipality that wants to build a neighborhood that fits their needs, and maybe it's a little outside of your comfort level of the homes being built, but it does relieve pressure all the way through the line. 20 years ago, and this isn't fair because she's not in the room, but I was in Montpelier Rotary Club. Senator Cummings came in. I'm sure we were having a forum or something, and I sat at the same table as she. And she was a realtor in her career. I don't know if many of you know that. And she gave us a little primer. This is 20 years ago on how there's a cycle that happens, and we have all these people. Maybe the kids are out of the house, they're close to retirement, they want to get out of their big house, and there was no place for them to go. There's no condo for them to move into, and it stops the cycle from happening. We're in a similar situation right now with what's happening. I think Josh mentioned somebody said you plant a tree now. I think it was Jeff Carr, the legislator's economist, who said, how do you build affordable housing? You build a house today and you wait 20 years. And I always remember him making that remark. I do want to address DEPSI a little bit, and I am by means no expert. And if Jessica is by chance listening and I say something that gets her in trouble, I'll have to deal with her later. Josh did a good job explaining the thinking behind moving the sunset out to 10 years, and DEPSI is required to give a report at that point. More importantly, and I think the auditor kind of skipped over this, is that DEPSI is required to deliver an annual report to committee every April 1st. That's very important. you all do need a chance to look at a new program like this. And you can pull the plug at any time if you think it's going awry and things aren't going the way you want them. That report includes for all approved projects, the date of approval, a description of the housing infrastructure project, original taxable value of the site, scope and value, number of units being created. There's a lot here, and I'm sure you can ask her more, but this is by no means, in 10 years, you get to have your first look and see how it went. You're going to be able to have Jessica sit in the hot seat every year and ask questions about how these projects are going. The auditor mentioned that, he said it kind of on the side. He suspects maybe some of the numbers of the housing need in the state are inflated. You all can ask yourselves that question. You're in your communities. You are hearing the problems out there and people not being able to find homes. He mentioned that, do we want to be building homes where there are no jobs? I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. People need homes wherever they are, wherever they want to live. I think of Calais, the town of Calais, which is made up of several small little hamlets. I can't imagine, Maple Corners is one of them right up here. Maybe 200 people live right around in the area of Maple Corners. Is the town of Calais and VEPC going to approve a big project in Calais? Are they going to want to approve that kind of project where there's 40 units or something like that? They wouldn't have the infrastructure for it, to get infrastructure out there for that. So I think there are some good natural guardrails built into CHIP as it's already in the bill.
Andrew, you're not one of the guys from Maple Corners, are you?
I'm not one of the guys from Maple Corners. But I'm up there all the time. Curtis Pond is a great place to go swimming in the summer. Like I said, I'm not going to get into the specific details. I mean, Josh and Samantha know way more about, the background growth that could provide numbers. Obviously, Jessica is your resource for BEPC. But I just wanted to provide some high level encouragement to continue forward. This is it's not. I heard the auditor say, does anybody think that but for this bill passing, we would never build any more housing? No, nobody's looking at this as a silver bullet. This is going to cure all our housing. I think most of you have been, maybe in December, you have an all legislative update, and I've heard Maura Collins, I'm paraphrasing, say something like, I bet you each of you has an idea to solve housing, and I'm here to tell you, you're all wrong. It's all of those ideas. And she's right when she puts it like that. And this is one of them. This is one way I think we may be able to build some homes. Mike, Representative Marcotte, tax stabilization. I think it's worthy of pursuing as an also in addition to. Clearly, there are some very small communities who even this idea of a small TIF project, nowhere near the complexity of a TIF district, designed to be small and easy, may be too much for some communities. And so I think tax stabilization is an idea worthy of. Now I know I'm going to trip myself up, but there are some towns that already have in statute the ability where the town council, city council can approve it. And I think you're going to noodle around with some of that language. Is there a way to make that available for other towns to look at it? But I think it could be a viable option for a lot of smaller towns.
I think when you were talking about, small municipalities like Calais or others, I think we have to remember that they surround population centers where the jobs are. Not everybody is going to live, as much as we would love them to, live on Main Street. But we do need bedroom communities as well, right? So I think that, we need to think of it in that respect as well.
I will end just with does TIF take from the ed fund? I think you've all heard plenty on that. Actually, I'm very grateful for the time that you all took early in the session with your joint hearings and what have you to familiarize yourselves with TIF. I think there are some people who proceed with the assumption that yes, all of these projects would have been built otherwise. We have absolutely taken from the ed fund. And I don't know if you're going to convince people otherwise. But as I'll leave it with Representative Olson's comment that it's a judgment call in the end, whether or not you think these would have been built or not.
And I think when we look at, I mean, I guess you can make that argument with TIF. With this proposal on CHIP, I think we already know that we're not building the houses that we need to build. Right, and so what more can we do to encourage more of that growth?
That's all I have for you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
I'm curious about from the perspective of your clients, the home builders. So this bill has sort of has gone through a few iterations, I think. When we first started hearing about, I think it was the spark or whatever we called it. That it seems to have one of the things that I've seen has changed. That the scope of the type of work or infrastructure that could be promoted by it. It started out, I think, with housing as well as infrastructure, and now it looks like it's just infrastructure. And I was wondering what your clients thought about that.
So I can think of it in terms of the builders, but also in terms of regional development corporations. There has to be a housing component at the end of the line, say, for infrastructure. If we think about infrastructure, water, sewer lines, sidewalks, streets. In order to have a CHIP, there has to be housing at the end of the line somehow. From the RDC standpoint, they like that. They like the fact that there's a broad definition here, that there is a possibility of some mixed use development. They like that idea that not all on its own, it has to be a housing component, must be housing involved. But I think you all have heard, the example, somebody said, well, what about, businesses on the ground floor and apartments on the second floor? Perfect. That kind of thing. The builders, again, the guys who swing the hammers are going to follow the developers. The developer is going to say, I'm working on this project, haven't been able to make it work. Now there's this CHIP program. Are you free in August to start building? And so, the guys swinging the hammer are going to follow the developers, and that's where they get their work primarily. Again, there are builders who are take single family residential home jobs on their own. This means nothing to them. They're much more concerned with the new 800-foot rule and Act 250 or residential building energy standards that raise the cost of a home, things like that. But this part of it, I literally can't even get them to return an email on TIF and CHIP. It's just not in their wheelhouse.
And just delve a little further.
Yeah.
So I think that earlier iteration of the program, it was available for actual housing construction, not just infrastructure.
Yeah.
So I was wondering what you're thinking about that.
I like this better. Because I think it's the community that winds up owning the infrastructure. And I think that's better. And I think that's going to blend itself to further development and tie in to that infrastructure. Yeah.
Questions for you? Dave?
Out of curiosity, how would your interests, so to speak, respond if there was a requirement added that a specific amount of defined level of affordable housing had to be included at some point?
Well, there's a spectrum of developers and builders, and every time you tack something on, that spectrum gets a little smaller. And that's what would happen there. If you put a requirement of affordability on it, we can do that. But where's the money going to come from to provide the incentive to get a builder to take on the job, to get a developer to take on the job? Does that make sense? If you say we're going to cap it at 150% of AMI, What's that number in Chittenden County? $142,000 a year household income, something like that. You could say, okay, 30% of their income, this is what they can get for a mortgage, and you land on a $500,000 home. It's tough for the market to build a $500,000 home all on its own and have it pencil out right now. You're going to have a subsidy to go along with that to get a builder to take on that job. So you could attach affordability, got to be some money that goes with it. And that's the rub. That's the hard part.
Thank you, Reed.
Told you, plenty of time for lunch.
Must be looking at this.
We have the floor at 1 and back in here. I think we're taking a look at 122.
Yes.
So we'll have a walk. Senator Clarkson and Rick, and then we'll have some testimony from a few people. So any questions before we go offline? Great.